Hello, everyone. I'm David C., the Clerk with a Mouth, and welcome to Issue 3 of Comics Are Garbage. On this episode, I figured I'd just kind of lay back and talk about my personal history with comic books. I grew up in the small village of Cridersville, Ohio. Funnily enough, it was later, as an adult, it was renamed Snydersville after D. Snyder of Twisted Sister, because he visited there, just for the day. So a little tidbit. Other than that, nothing ever happened in that small nothing fucking town. So, growing up there, around 1994-95, because I'm old as shit, I was a little kid, and the only way I could ever get my hands on comics was to walk the other side of town, not a big town, so it was no big deal, to Dave's Market, a small little grocery store, and they would get a small handful of comics here and there. And they would never get the next issue. Sometimes, rarely, I would get the next issue. But it just seemed really random, the things that they would get. They would get every issue of WWF magazine, so God knows I would buy that, and I would buy a comic book. But I ended up with a lot of comic books that I only had single random issues of. First ones were like Spider-Man number 48 with Hobgoblin killing the Demogoblin, or Demogoblin, however you want to pronounce it. The Darkness number 15. Witchblade and Tomb Raider had a crossover because it was the 90s, why not? Some random Avengers issues. One was where they were assembling the Avengers again. So there was a lot of characters in that so I was like subjected to a whole lot of new characters, to me anyway, in just one issue. So that was a lucky pickup where I learned a lot about a lot of different Avengers. Because remember, this was before the internet and stuff was big or even existed. So, I had no way of knowing anything about these characters other than the issues that I could find. And there was no comic book stores that I knew of around. And we weren't really poor, but we were far from rich, so it's not like we went out of town much or could buy stuff like that. You know, I could get back when comics were like $1, $2, I could go down to Dave's Market and buy an issue. Once a week or something like that. So that was no big deal. Venom number 1, Carnage Unleashed, which that cover, and to see that art and everything as a young child, keep in mind I grew up loving horror movies, so when I saw that I was like, yeah, this is for me. A lot of the issues, it was mostly Marvel. Surprisingly, a lot of Image comics and some indie comics. Not too much DC, and I think that's kind of why I grew up and I've always been a Marvel guy, because that's what I had growing up as a kid. I love Batman, I love a lot of DC. I grew up to love it. Once I found out more about it, other than just the movies and whatnot, but really, comics-wise, I've just always been Marvel. And you can tell it's true that comics, so get your kids into comics early, because a lot of the stuff that I love to this day are the comics and the characters that I grew up with. So the nostalgia factor is hardcore. Because keep in mind, growing up with Spider-Man number 48, 49, 50, that directly led into the Clone Saga, which a lot of people say is one of the worst things that have ever happened to Spider-Man. And yet, I grew up reading that, so I loved it, of course. And I do plan on doing a retrospective about that whole saga sometime, just because I love it that much. So, I had gotten a Spawn action figure that came with a comic. It was kind of like a condensed version of the first comic, so it was only a few pages, but hell, as a kid, I learned who Spawn was before a lot of like mainstream characters. So I thought that was really cool, especially the Darkness. I love the Darkness. I love Jackie Estacado. They came out with the video games. I'm going to talk about those eventually. Just a lot of my favorite characters. I was lucky enough to find these issues. Now, sadly, because of growing up and not taking care of stuff and whatnot, I don't have a lot of the comics that I grew up with, the actual issues. Some just got damaged because I didn't take care of them properly because I was a kid. What did I know? I have rebought some of them, just newer, better conditioned versions, but I still wish I had a lot of those, like, same issues. So by the time I was old enough to actually go to comic book stores and found other places that sold comics, of course I just kept buying Spider-Man. That's mostly what I bought, and I just loved Spider-Man so much. He was definitely my favorite. I loved how it could be serious, but also funny as hell, and that's why eventually I grew out of it, or they stopped getting comics, I think, at Dave's Market, so I just had no access to them. Time went by, you don't think about it, and then when the internet became a thing and comic book stores became more readily available in my area, where I could drive and go there, I got into comics again because of Deadpool. Deadpool was Spider-Man, but more for adults because of how violent it is, but the funniness is there, and he can still be dead serious when he wants to be. And so really Deadpool is the reason why I got back into comics as an adult, and why I started getting a pull list and just started buying comics weekly, and eventually had enough issues that I opened up my own comic book store, and I do plan on talking about that someday. It's not open anymore, unfortunately, but we'll talk about that some other time. So I really don't own a fraction of what I used to, because a lot of it I sold at the store or got rid of when we closed down. And I wasn't into comics for a little while there, mostly because I couldn't afford to. And recently, well, not even recently, past 6 years or so, I've gotten back into it. Getting online, trying to rebuy issues that I had. It's cheaper just to get the graphic novels. Single issues go up in price. Graphic novels, a lot of the times they keep reprinting them, so they stay the same price. So if you want like a whole story, just buy a graphic novel. It's not as... I enjoy collecting floppies or the single issues, but it's just easier to take care of graphic novels. You have the whole story in one book, or books. It takes up less room, looks better on the shelf, etc. But, yeah, so a lot of... I'm going to do a lot of episodes where I'm going to talk about characters that I like, and I just wanted to do this video about me growing up, what comics I was reading, what ones I had access to, and kind of like, that's why those are still some of my favorite characters. I'm going to do an episode on the Darkness. I'm going to do an episode on the Spider-Man Clone Saga. Not only that, but the Ultimate Spider-Man series, the original. I wrote a whole retrospective for that on the old Comics Are Garbage website, which is now defunct, that I did years ago, but I do still have it. I might make a video version of it, but that's going to take forever and it's going to be so long. If you're interested, I could post it onto Facebook for you to read, but it's going to be a lot of scrolling. Because, like I said, it's really long. That's what she said. I'm going to do a lot of Spider-Man related episodes. Deadpool, I'll do one about the comics. I'll have to do a whole separate one about all the Deadpool merch and stuff that I own. Tie-ins to the movie. I have, it's over there, I just, on top of my dresser, just piled to the ceiling, all Deadpool related stuff that I would show you, but it's all covered in dust. I haven't touched it in a long time, and I don't want to show that on video, because that's embarrassing. You know, I'll make a whole video about that. I might do individual episodes of like comic book movies, like I talked about Bloodshot and the Bloodshot movie in the last issue. I might talk about the good, I might talk about bad. We'll see. I just kind of, like I said, I have a list of stuff I want to cover on Comics Are Garbage, but I don't really have, like, Everybody Dies, I have every season just planned out exactly what I'm covering, what I'm doing, when, what time. Comics Are Garbage, I'm doing kind of more freely, openly, just when I feel like it, and just what I feel like covering at that time, so I can't say what's going to be on the next episode until I just feel like doing it, so. But I'm up for ideas. You guys let me know if there's certain comics you want me to talk about, certain movies you want me to review, comic book related, obviously. Just let me know. And, I do an episode of some of my action figures. I mean, I still have a lot of stuff. Comics, actual comics, decent amount, but not as a fraction of what I used to have. But collectibles, I still have a lot. So you're interested in seeing any of those, you want to see me play with some toys because I'm a fucking man-child, let me know. But until then, I hope you enjoyed reminiscing with me. Nostalgia is always a good thing. So, just let me know. I've been David C., the Clerk with a Mouth, and you've been watching Comics Are Garbage, because sometimes they are. Just like me. See you next time, guys. Bye. Everybody dies. Horrible horror reviews for a horrible horror world. My name is fucking Dave, the new ass face of horror movie reviews. Check out facebook.com/everybodydieshorribly for more info.
Hey, I'm gonna fuck you, man! What's wrong with you? Look at you, you got a boner! God damn it.
Shut up.